Thank you for joining us. We are standing at the edge of an economic cliff, and the Supreme Court is holding the lever. Right now, a legal battle is unfolding that President Trump himself has called, quote, literally life or death for our country. Hyperbole? Maybe. But the truth is, the ruling coming out of the High Court could end his entire multi-trillion-dollar tariff regime and force the government to refund billions of dollars already collected, with some estimates for the repayment exceeding $100 billion. This isn't just about trade wars. This is about who holds the power to tax you, the American consumer. This is the Supreme Court versus Trump, and the winner changes the price of everything you buy. Stick with us, because we're going to break down this $1.2 trillion trade battle into three simple parts: the law, the fight, and the stakes for your wallet. To understand the stakes, we have to go back to the Constitution, way back. The Founding Fathers were clear. The power to impose taxes, and let's be honest, tariffs are just taxes on imported goods, belongs exclusively to Congress, not the president. But for decades, Congress has passed a series of vague laws that essentially gave the executive branch a blank check for emergency actions. The Trump administration used one of those laws, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA, to slap massive tariffs on a huge range of products from nearly a third of all U.S. imports, a move never before taken under this statute. Why? The president declared that long-standing trade deficits constituted a national emergency. Now, here is where the argument hits the fan. Opponents, a coalition of businesses and states, argue that a law meant for targeted sanctions against rogue regimes can't be used as a backdoor way to impose a $1.2 trillion tax on the American people, especially since IEEPA does not even mention the word tariffs. Think about it. Does this law let a president act like a king of commerce? Before we dive into the legal arguments, let me know in the comments. Do you think the president should have the power to impose tariffs without Congress's direct approval? Now let's step inside the Supreme Court for the high-stakes oral arguments in the consolidated cases, including Learning Resources versus Trump, which represents a direct and profound challenge to the expansive use of presidential authority. The core legal concept dominating this hearing is the Major Questions Doctrine, a constitutional principle which holds that Congress must speak clearly and explicitly when delegating decisions of vast economic or political significance to the executive branch. Legal analysts noted the deep skepticism expressed by justices across the ideological spectrum who questioned whether the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, a statute primarily designed for targeted sanctions, contains the clear statement necessary to authorize a president to unilaterally impose a multi-trillion-dollar tax hike on American consumers. Even conservative justices, who often champion presidential power, raised concerns that upholding the tariffs would effectively grant the president a boundless, uncheckable power to manage the economy, warning that this could create a dangerous precedent for future administrations to declare emergencies over issues like climate change or the housing crisis, circumventing Congress entirely. If the court ultimately strikes down the tariffs, the economic consequences would be immediate and dramatic. While importers and consumers could see an immediate drop in the price of many affected goods, the U.S. Treasury would face the loss of billions in annual revenue and, crucially, the massive administrative and fiscal challenge of having to refund an estimated $100 to $130 billion in duties already paid by businesses. The outcome not only tests the constitutional balance of power, but will immediately rattle global trade, forcing the administration to pivot to alternative, less flexible legal authorities to pursue its trade agenda. Now we turn to the political fallout, and what happens if the Supreme Court ultimately rules against the expansive use of presidential emergency power. If the court strikes down the International Emergency Economic Powers Act tariffs, they would likely disappear instantly. Yet this is not the end of the administration's ability to impose duties. The White House possesses crucial escape hatches, most notably the ability to invoke Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974, which grants the president the explicit, though highly limited authority to impose tariffs of up to 15% for a mere 150 days to address significant balance of payments deficits. However, this is a clear stopgap measure, not a long-term economic strategy, and it faces procedural constraints that IEEPA bypassed. The biggest constitutional ramification of a negative ruling is the fundamental shift in the balance of power. It would be a massive win for Congress, effectively compelling the legislative branch to reclaim its constitutional authority over taxation and trade, an area where it has been demonstrably hands-off for decades, allowing presidential power to swell. This precedent-setting ruling would serve as a powerful check on the executive branch for generations to come, defining whether trade policy is dictated by the unilateral will of a single person in the White House or by the people's elected representatives in Congress. This case, despite its arcane legal foundation in a 1977 trade law, is thus profoundly important because it addresses the fundamental structure of who governs the American economy. If the tariffs go, you might see a small, incremental drop in consumer prices, but the massive refund liability could also pressure the federal budget. If they stay, the status quo of high import costs and tariff revenue continues. The Supreme Court's decision, expected sometime next year, is the final word on this colossal trade and constitutional battle. Before we move on, take 2 seconds. Like this video and tell me your thoughts in the comments. It fuels the conversation and helps us grow.